In the hush of Manhattan's late hours, a single phone call pulls Nero Wolfe and Archie Goodwin into a shadowy game no one dares name. Where in the world are you listening from tonight? And subscribe so you never miss upcoming mysteries. Nero Wolfe and the murder Cramer couldn't report. I don't usually assign cosmic motives to a ringing telephone, but that night the thing chimed with the sly precision of a pickpocket touching your wallet exactly when your elbow is turned. It was 11:15 by the office clock, and I was weighing the moral merit of a ginger ale versus calling it quits, when the desk phone cut through the room like a drill bit. Wolfe, who had been administering silent judgment on the stack of correspondence before him, raised his eyes with the same expression he might give a mosquito attempting opera. He didn't touch the phone. Wolfe touching a telephone outside of emergencies is as rare as Fritz burning a sauce, but curled a finger at me. I lifted the receiver. I expected Lon Cohen, Fritz reporting calamity in the pantry, which never happens, or a wrong number looking for a Brooklyn butcher. What I got was Inspector Cramer's voice, low, strained, and carrying an edge I had never heard from him. Not anger, not impatience, something worse, hesitation. "Good evening, Inspector," I said, because etiquette, unlike murder, is still legal in Manhattan. "You sound like you're calling from the bottom of a well." "Put Wolfe on," he muttered. Not barked, muted, quiet, like someone could overhear him. I glanced at Wolfe, his eyes narrowed. "Mr. Wolfe is indisposed," I said. "He's engaged in complex thought." "Damn it, Goodwin," Cramer hissed. "This isn't a social call. I need—" He paused, inhaled sharply. "It's about a murder I can't report." That did it. Wolfe extended a hand, palm up, imperious. I passed him the receiver like a courtier passing a scepter. "This is Nero Wolfe," he said. "I trust this call has some rational justification for disturbing my evening." "Wolfe," Cramer's voice dropped even further. "I can't explain. Not over the line. Not anywhere public. I need to talk without the department knowing I talked." "Absurd," Wolfe said. "If you have encountered a homicide, report it. If not, go to bed." "It is a homicide," Cramer growled. "But if I report it now, it disappears. You know how certain committees operate. This one's worse." Wolfe sat up half an inch, which for him is the difference between apathy and alarm. "Committees?" "Civic Reform Board," Cramer muttered. "High profile, influential. You'll read about it when the papers stop kissing its shoes." Wolfe exhaled through his nose, his version of a gasp. "Inspector, you are saying you have knowledge of a death and voluntarily elect to leave the body unrecorded?" "Just for now," he snapped softly. "I'm buying time, and I need you to, hell, I don't know, hold the truth somewhere safe. Don't open a case, don't take a client, don't make notes, don't let this leak. Not yet." I couldn't help myself. "Inspector, are we moving into the service of imaginary corpses? Because if so, I'd like to renegotiate my job description." "Shut up, Goodwin," he muttered, but there wasn't heat in it. Wolfe shot me a glower that contained 90% indignation and 10% affection, the latter begrudging. Wolfe cleared his throat. "Inspector, your request is incoherent. If you wish me to act, I require facts. If you wish me not to act, say goodbye." "What I want," Cramer said, "is for you to understand that I'm sitting on something big, bigger than the badge protects. A body, a place, a situation I can't explain until I know who's involved. If I file a report, someone up the chain buries it, burying me with it." Wolfe tapped a finger on the desk's polished surface, a gesture he uses when reality disappoints him. "Who is the victim?" "I can't tell you." "Where?" "I can't tell you." "Inspector, pfui." "Wolfe, listen." His whisper came through choppy like someone was near him. Damn, someone's coming." There was a faint hiss, like the sigh of elevator doors in a high-rise, not precinct background noise, something smoother, ritzier, not Cramer's usual habitat. "Don't call me. Don't try to reach me," Cramer muttered. The line went dead. Wolfe stayed rigid, hand hovering over the cradle, staring at nothing. Then he replaced the receiver with exaggerated delicacy as if the phone had personally failed him. I waited 5 seconds before speaking, which is 5 more than I usually offer. "Well, shall I fetch a tome on clairvoyance so we can solve the murder he won't name, at the location he won't reveal, involving the victim he won't describe?" "Archie," Wolfe said, "you test my patience. You love it." He made a sound like a buffalo sighing in Latin. "Beer," he declared. I blinked. For me? For us both. After 11, it is permissible. Aha. Concern masquerading as hospitality. If I ever write a handbook called Translating Wolfe, Chapter 1 will explain that when he worries about me, even mildly, he deploys chilled beverages as decoys. I headed to the kitchen door, knocked, Fritz insists on proper protocols, and relayed the order. Fritz soon appeared with 2 frosted glasses and a bottle kept so cold the condensation performed a slow waltz down the glass. Fritz never asks questions. He merely raises his eyebrows high enough to suggest that he already knows the answers and finds them inefficient. Wolfe poured with ceremonial precision. I took a sip and let the chill settle behind my ribs. He lifted his own glass and drank, which he rarely does outside meals. "Archie," he said, "describe the inspector's voice." Like someone was standing next to him who shouldn't be, or could overhear. He nodded once. And the hiss. Elevator doors. Indeed. He set the glass down. Not the precinct. That's what I thought, I said, unless they upgraded the place with chrome and velvet. Wolfe drummed the desk with 2 fingers, another sign of agitation. He has compromised himself. Cramer does not permit entanglement without necessity. He trusts you. That, Wolfe said stiffly, is not a comfort. I grinned. Look on the bright side. If the body never becomes official, you won't have to testify. He shot me a look that would curdle a street vendor's cream. Archie, a man is dead. That stopped me from pushing further. Wolfe uses the word man sparingly in that tone. He leaned back, closed his eyes, and engaged that silent internal abacus he calls a mind. A civic reform board, he murmured. Political influence. Unrecorded death. And Cramer concealed at a location serviced by an elevator stout enough to hiss audibly through a telephone line. That narrows it down to half of Manhattan. His eyelids snapped open. Archie, I will not have facetiousness. I disagree. You need it for balance. He snorted, a rare, soft exhale that in wolf speak equals tolerable point acknowledged. He reached for the bell cord, but then changed course, choosing instead to sip his beer. I must think, he said. We will not act until Cramer contacts us again. You will remain available. I saluted with my glass. I'm always available, except during my nightly ginger ale deliberations. Phooey, I smirked. Inspector sounded scared, I said softer. Wolfe paused mid-sip. Yes. And scared Cramer is not a good omen. No, Wolfe agreed. It is not. We fell silent. The office felt heavier, like someone had added political anxiety to the air circulation system. The lamplight cast Wolfe's bulk in golden relief, and he looked less like a sedentary genius and more like a stone lion deciding which invader to crush. At 11:32 the phone rang again. Wolfe jerked, half an inch, the Wolfe equivalent of a man leaping onto a table. I grabbed it. Nero Wolfe's residence, no voice, just another faint hiss. Elevator doors, somewhere above the city. Then a click. Wolfe closed his eyes. This is intolerable, he said. If he expects me to divine meaning from silence, he mistakes me for a mystic. Maybe he's trying to signal us without signaling us. Archie. I know. Shut up. He didn't correct me. I set the receiver down. Want me to call Lon? See if the Gazette heard anything on the grapevine? No, Wolfe said instantly. If the inspector is compromised, feeding rumours to the press may endanger him. Protectiveness again. Wolfe's this time toward Cramer. I resisted the urge to comment. Wolfe noticing his own soft spots is hazardous to everyone in the vicinity. What do you want me to do? I asked. For the moment, nothing. He drained the rest of the beer, a gesture practically volcanic in Wolfe terms. We wait. That's it? That is the action suitable to the moment. Tomorrow we shall address the matter of civic boards. Can I at least finish my ginger ale debate? Confound you. I grinned, took the glass, and headed toward the door. Behind me, Wolfe called, Archie? I turned. If the inspector calls again, he said, voice lower, you will answer promptly. I always do. Yes, Wolfe murmured. I know. He waved me off. That was my cue. I left the office with the lingering suspicion that tonight's quiet would not survive dawn, and that whatever Cramer had stumbled into would drag us headfirst into a civic swamp full of high-rise hiss and political ghosts. Behind me, Wolfe finally pulled the bell cord. Ritual restored. The morning sunlight creeping through the brownstone's front windows had the polite, guilty look of someone arriving late to a party they weren't invited to. I was in the office at a few minutes before 9, which meant Wolfe should have been climbing into his elevator on his way to the Orchids. Instead, he was sitting behind his desk, like a storm cloud pretending to be furniture, one thumb pressed against the edge of a book he wasn't reading. That alone told me more about his state of mind than a psychiatrist with a fountain pen. When Wolfe skips orchid time, the universe is misaligned. When he does it voluntarily, someone somewhere is bleeding, or about to. I sat on the red leather chair opposite him and pretended to write in my notebook. Pretending is useful when you're trying to see whether Nero Wolfe's eyebrows twitch. Today, they didn't twitch. They hovered. "You're early," he said without looking at me. "And you're horizontal rather than vertical," I said. "Should I alert the tabloids?" "Archie." That was all he offered. Not a fooey, not a lecture. Just my name, in a tone that suggested any sentence I added would be thrown back into my face, pre-chewed, which naturally encouraged me to add one. "If you're worried about Cramer," I said lightly, "you could try calling him, or hiring a medium." Before Wolfe could craft a reply sharp enough to cut upholstery, footsteps approached the office. Not Fritz's soft Swiss tread, not the slow thudding of the elevator. Someone else. A brisk heel click that meant business. A knock. 3 even raps. Wolfe frowned. "Yes?" The door opened exactly 2 inches, Fritz's personal signature on the art of discretion, and he said, "Mr. Wolfe, a visitor," in the tone he reserves for ingredients he cannot entirely vouch for. "A woman." "Name?" Wolfe asked. Fritz hesitated, which in Fritz language means something was off. She did not provide one. Wolfe's eyes sharpened. "Send her in." Fritz vanished, and the door swung inward to reveal a tall woman in a dove-grey suit that looked like it had been tailored by a couturier who charged by the yard of dignity. She had the bearing of someone who had spent years supervising other supervisors. Her chin was firm, her gloves spotless, and her eyes swept the office with the efficiency of a customs inspector. She did not smile. She stepped inside like someone entering a courtroom where she had every intention of winning. Wolfe did not rise. He gestured toward the client chair. "Madam." She sat, crossing her legs with mechanical precision. "Mr. Wolfe, I require absolute privacy." Wolfe's brows lifted half an inch. "I do not grant absolutes. You may speak. Mr. Goodwin is indispensable to my work." "I won't speak until the room is secured." Wolfe inhaled, slowly, deeply. "This is my office," he said. "In this sphere, I determine the conditions." If she was impressed, she hid it well. "Then my name stays mine." Wolfe's tone iced over. "I am not a confessor. If you withhold essential information, I cannot assist you. Retainers are void under anonymity." In response, she reached into her handbag, withdrew a long cream envelope and placed it on Wolfe's desk. $5,000, she said. "Cash." Wolfe didn't touch it. He stared as if she'd offered him a dead ferret. Generosity does not buy exception. "It buys discretion," she said smoothly. "No," Wolfe said. "It buys service under condition. Identity is one." She exhaled, a small, annoyed breath, barely audible. "My name," she said, "is irrelevant. What matters is my position." Wolfe's jaw tensed. "Madam, you test my patience, and you test mine." Her gaze shifted to me briefly, measured, calculating. "I am secretary to the Metropolitan Civic Advancement League." My pen stilled. That was the same flavor of civic machinery Cramer had muttered about last night in the world's worst attempt at a secret call. Wolfe remained still, but I noticed the faint twitch in his left hand, there and gone. "Proceed," he said. "We had an emergency board session last night," she said. "One of our board members walked out of the room and never returned. He has not been home, he has not been seen, and the League refuses to contact the police." "And yet, you have contacted me," Wolfe said, eyes narrowing. She nodded once, discreetly, against instruction. "Against whose instruction?" I asked. She ignored me. Wolfe did not. "Answer Mr. Goodwin." Her jaw tightened. "The League's Executive Council," Wolfe prodded. "Why?" "Because," she said, choosing each word like a paper cutter trimming edges, A scandal tied to any of our board members could compromise reform initiatives that affect every borough. They want silence. They want delay. They want control. And you, Wolfe asked. I want to know, she said, lowering her voice, whether he's dead. That nudged the room a degree colder. She wasn't dramatic about it. She wasn't trembling. She spoke as a woman accustomed to facts, grim ones. Wolfe leaned forward. On what basis do you suspect death? She hesitated, a crack in the perfect posture. There was an argument, private, heated, and after it he left the room. No one followed. No one saw him again. Madam, Wolfe said, are you withholding? I am protecting, she said. Wolfe's voice hardened. If you lie to me again, you may collect your money and depart. That landed. Her shoulders stiffened. The truth, she forced out, is that the council fears he intended to disclose sensitive financial irregularities, donor issues, allocations, political alignments. If he has been harmed, the League must not be implicated. A noble sentiment, I said dryly. And if he's alive? Then we must find him before anyone else does. Wolfe gave me a sideways glance, the kind that says, see what nonsense the world brings me. Her gloved hand shifted over her clutch, and something small slipped out, a metallic clink. A pin, round, engraved with a lighthouse wrapped in laurel leaves. She reached for it instinctively, but I was faster. I picked it up, turning it in my fingers. Heavy, well-made, not the sort they hand out at summer picnics. That's League insignia, she said sharply. I smiled. Souvenir for me? No. She nearly snatched it back. It mustn't be lost. Wolfe's eyes followed the pin like a hawk spotting prey. So, he murmured, you belong to that echelon of the League. She froze. Wolfe did not elaborate, which was worse for her. Silence is Wolfe's scalpel. He tapped a finger on the envelope she'd brought. Your retainer is accepted, but I warn you, deceive me once more and the engagement ends. Understood. Wolfe shifted his gaze to me. Archie. Yes, sir? You will accompany the lady when she leaves. Discreetly. You will observe without being observed. You will return with intelligence. The client stiffened. I do not require an escort. Wolfe's reply was so mild it was almost tender. You require what I decide you require. Archie? I grinned. If she's the secretary, I'm the king of Albania. Wolfe murmured, I am relieved you lack the temperament to pursue either throne. She rose abruptly, offended but trying not to show it. I'll expect efficiency, Mr. Wolfe. You shall have it, Wolfe said, if you offer candour. She left with a swish of grey fabric sharp enough to slice air. Fritz gave us a discreet nod through the doorway as he went to see her out. I leaned back. Well, she's about as anonymous as the Statue of Liberty. Wolfe didn't smile. Archie, trail her, now, before orchid hours begin. That was as clear a dismissal as a bell-cord tug. I grabbed my coat. Wolfe added, without looking up, Take care. That was Wolfe speak for don't get killed. I nodded and headed out, already feeling the weight of the lighthouse and laurel pin in my pocket, and the heavier suspicion that our unnamed client had just opened the door to the same shadow Cramer stumbled into. The woman's perfume still clung to my coat like a reminder not to trust anyone wearing gloves before noon. I stepped out of the brownstone at 9:40 with a spring chill cutting through West 35th Street and headed downtown behind her taxi, giving the cabbie a smile that said I wasn't tailing anybody. I was just a man deeply committed to coincidental travel. By the time we reached the shadow of the Metropolitan Civic Advancement League's monolithic Art Deco headquarters, she'd forgotten to look over her shoulder, which was mistake number one in a morning full of mistakes. The building rose like someone had tried to stack ambition on top of guilt and polished the whole thing in brushed steel. The lobby, marble floors, brass fixtures, and enough echo to host a chorus, was already humming with the kind of important people who believe a clipboard can substitute for a conscience. I planted myself behind a column near the elevator bank and adopted the posture of a man waiting for someone who owed him money. The secretary, our anonymous client, breezed through security, greeted by two attendants who bowed with the enthusiasm usually reserved for royalty or payroll managers. She vanished inside the express elevator. I checked the indicator lights, counted floors. Standard drill. 10 minutes into my surveillance, the building swallowed her whole, and then belched. A shout erupted from upstairs, muffled but sharp enough to hit the lobby like a slap. "Get a doctor!" someone howled. A clang from the elevator machinery followed, then frantic voices. The operators, who had been leaning against the wall chatting about baseball, snapped to attention and disappeared into a side access door. Now, when elevator operators run without stopping to flirt with receptionists or debate batting averages, something is wrong. I slipped after them, giving the impression I had been summoned by the universe to inspect machinery. The access corridor smelled like machine grease and old promises. I ducked under a chain, followed the staircase up half a flight, and found 2 operators crouched near the open side of the shaft, faces white. One kept muttering, "He shouldn't have been there. He shouldn't," which made me a lot more interested in what there was. A narrow service walkway hugged the shaft, and from that angle I could see him, the missing league board member, wedged between the roof of one elevator car and the floor of another, sprawled like he had taken a wrong turn on the way to a political luncheon. His head bore a crack that looked anything but accidental, unless the man had developed a hobby of head-butting moving steel. Blood had trickled down the side of the shaft, already drying. His body was arranged, deliberately, too deliberately. One arm was bent neatly under him, the other hanging with the limp grace of a stage actor in a second-rate tragedy. His suit jacket was unwrinkled, his tie was straight. Accidental fools don't straighten ties. I leaned in closer, careful to avoid touching anything except my own rising suspicion. His right hand showed dark smudges along the thumb and index finger, the unmistakable tattoo left by a fountain pen. But his pockets were empty. Whoever had staged him had lifted the pen. A red herring flashed in my head. Maybe he'd left it at home. But no, these reform board types carry pens like soldiers carry rifles. Losing one would require losing an arm. "Back away," someone hissed. I ducked behind a pillar as footsteps thundered down the service walkway. 4 league members marched toward the shaft with the solemn energy of undertakers on a deadline. Leading them, her, the secretary. Her face revealed nothing, but her eyes darted once toward the dead man's ink-stained hand, then away, too fast. "No doctors," the tallest man muttered. "No police." "Exactly," she replied sharply. "We'll handle this internally. Move him before anyone else sees." Handle it internally. That phrase always means 2 things: cover up and panic. Both were currently tap dancing around the dead man's corpse. They maneuvered the body onto a stretcher brought up from the service corridor. As they passed, a folder slipped from the secretary's arm and skidded across the floor. "Confidential," stamped in bold letters, offered itself to me like a flirtatious librarian. I stepped out just long enough to flip it open. A roster: names, donors, political allies, funding channels, big money, big egos, big trouble. Before I could memorize more than a few names, someone snapped, "Pick that up." I obliged, passing it back with an apologetic grin. "Staff only," she said coldly, eyes narrowing. "Forgive me," I said. "I thought confidential meant public reading material in this building." Her glare could have iced coffee. They moved the body toward a rear service elevator. No police, no report, just whispers of delays and no publicity. If civic advancement meant advancing corpses through hidden corridors, the League was thriving. Once the group disappeared, I backtracked, exited the service area, and stepped casually into the main lobby like a man whose morning had unfolded exactly as planned. I walked out, grabbed a cab, and headed home, resisting the urge to look over my shoulder. The League had enough eyes for everyone. When I stepped inside the brownstone, it was 10:45. Wolfe was in his office with the expression of a man who had been meditating on the world's incompetence and found it consistently disappointing. "You're early," he grunted, a sign of mild relief disguised as mild irritation. "I aim to please," I said, tossing my hat onto the rack, "and to inform." "Report." I did, every detail, from the building's marble pretension to the staged corpse on the elevator roof. Wolfe's fingers steepled tighter with every sentence. When I mentioned the missing pen, he grunted, a wolf grunt, which is to normal grunts what a rare orchid is to daisies. "Ink smudges," he repeated, "and the pen is absent." "Picked clean," I said, like someone wanted whatever he wrote last. Before Wolfe could reply, the phone rang. At precisely 11 o'clock. He stared at it like it owed him money. Answer. I picked it up. Nero Wolfe's residence, Archie Goodwin speaking. Cramer's voice came through in a low growl. Goodwin, put Wolfe on. Wolfe extended a hand, and I passed the receiver. This is Wolfe. I don't want details, Cramer said. I don't want anything. I just want you to contain Goodwin. Wolfe stiffened. Inspector. I know he was there, Cramer snapped, but his tone wasn't anger. It was fatigue, laced with frustration. You were right. It's a mess, but don't make this worse. Wolfe's eyebrow twitched. That's Wolfe speak for you, poor doomed man. I endeavour, he said calmly, never to worsen what others have already crippled. Cramer snorted. Yeah, well, do me one favour. Keep Goodwin from poking the hornet nest too hard. I leaned in and said, Inspector, poking is in my job description. Then get a new one. Wolfe gave me a look that blended annoyance with, dare I say it, fond resignation. Inspector, he said, you may rely on my prudence, but not on my retreat. A beat of silence, then quietly, just don't get yourself killed. The line went dead. Wolfe set the receiver down and pressed both hands onto the desk, as if bracing against the stupidity of mankind. Well, I said, if this is their version of civic improvement, I'd hate to see civic collapse. Wolfe closed his eyes. Archie, sit. I sat. We are now entangled, he said. The inspector's involvement confirms that the League was the scene of last night's death, and that political forces are already manipulating the truth. So, what's the plan? The plan, Wolfe said, ringing the bell cord, is lunch. Right on cue, Fritz appeared in the doorway, offering a nod that said soup was imminent. Wolfe opened his eyes. You, he said, will prepare your notes after we dine. And Archie. Yes, sir. Exert caution. That was the Wolfe equivalent of a hug. I stood, smirked, and said, Sure. I'll only poke the hornet nest with the small stick. Archie. All right, medium stick. He sighed, a sound like a man who had seen too much idiocy for one lifetime, and motioned me toward the dining room. Late afternoon sunlight poured through the office windows with the lazy indifference of a cat stretching on a radiator. I was at my desk typing up a memorandum Wolfe had dictated 3 days earlier, and then refused to sign because he disliked the spacing of one line. At 4:15, any sane man would have been in the plant rooms. Wolfe, however, had chosen to remain in the office, pretending to read Pliny while actually listening for the phone or the bell. He didn't fool me. He never does. The quiet broke with a sound that didn't belong in our brownstone, a soft knock. Not the normal client tap-tap of desperation, not the aggressive smash favoured by reporters. This was polite. Polite knocks in our line of work are unnatural and almost certainly dangerous. Wolfe looked up sharply enough to give the impression he'd been tugged by a string. Archie, he murmured. See who that is. I crossed the room, opened the door, and nearly swallowed my gum. Inspector Cramer stood there, hat in hand, wearing a look normally reserved for widowers and men told the butcher was out of liver. More shocking than his expression was his method of arrival. He had knocked gently. Evening, Goodwin, he muttered. Inspector, I said, if you start knocking like a civilized man, I won't know how to behave. Zip it, he said without heat. He stepped past me as if every motion cost him a pound of pride. Cramer is a lot of things, gruff, tired, stubborn, but he rarely looks defeated. Today he looked like someone had left him in a room full of political lawyers and slammed the door. Wolfe set aside his book. Inspector, I assume your presence at this hour has a purpose. Cramer didn't sit. That was another red flag. He hovered near the edge of the rug, hands fidgeting with his hat brim. When Cramer fidgets, the world is off axis. I didn't want to come, he said, but I need to put something somewhere safe. Wolfe arched a brow. The brownstone is not a bank vault. No, Cramer grunted. It's better. At least what I put here doesn't get misplaced by commissioners. That earned a Wolfe grunt, one of the rare ones, the kind that sounds like skepticism wrestling with respect. Proceed, Wolfe said. Cramer took a breath. The man who died in that damn League building, the one you won't admit Archie saw. I maintained a neutral expression. Wolfe raised his chin. I admit nothing. Right, Cramer said. Fine. Pretend we're all blind. But the dead man, we'll call him X, he wasn't just a board member. He was a whistleblower. He had proof, real proof, of corruption inside the Metropolitan Civic Advancement League. Corruption? I asked. You shock me. And here I thought civic reform was all apple pie and patriotic hymns. Cramer gave me a bleak look. This isn't a joke, Goodwin. I wasn't joking. That was sarcasm with a light glaze. Wolfe cleared his throat sharply. Inspector, you said he had proof. A notebook, Cramer said. Coded. The kind of thing accountants keep when they don't trust anybody. Not bosses, not colleagues, not even themselves. X figured out something ugly. Donor funds funneled to private pockets. Political favours. Payoffs. The whole rotten stew. He slapped his hat against his thigh. And last night, right before he died, he had a blowout argument with one of those donors, a guy who thinks he owns the league because he signs the checks. Wolfe narrowed his eyes. Name? Cramer laughed. Short. Bitter. No. If I give you the name, it leaks. Not from you, he added, which from Cramer is a warm hug, but from somewhere downstream, and then I get buried. Literally? Maybe. Professionally? Definitely. Wolfe's fingers pressed together. Then why come? Because I can't trust anyone else. He said it flatly, like it tasted bad in his mouth. If I report the death, it gets rewritten. If I raise hell, I get disciplined. If I stay quiet, I'm complicit. I'm stuck, and I hate being stuck. And you need us, I offered helpfully. I don't need you, Cramer snapped. Then softer. I need Wolfe to anchor the truth. If you find something, I didn't ask. If you dig too deep, I'll deny I ever came. But if someone tries to erase this guy from the books, I want at least one man in the city who knows what was real. Wolfe closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them with the heavy patience of a man selecting a chess piece he doesn't actually want to move. Inspector, you are dancing perilously close to involving yourself. Cramer's shoulders sagged. I know. Believe me, I know. And you have come to me, Wolfe said, not as an employer, nor as an adversary, but as a custodian of a truth you are forbidden to keep. That's it, Cramer muttered. Wolfe sighed. You give partial facts. You withhold names. You refuse clarity. You entangle yourself and risk entangling me. You think I don't know that? Cramer barked, but there was no bite in it. This isn't how I work. Hell, this isn't how anyone should work. I'm tired, Wolfe. Tired of these committees throwing weight around like they're dukes in a medieval kingdom. A man died, and they want it cleaned up before it stains their carpets. He rubbed his forehead with a thumb. I can't report what I know. Not yet. Not until I have something nobody can erase. Wolfe studied him, not with disdain, though Wolfe's default is close, but with something like reluctant understanding. Inspector, Wolfe said quietly, if I speak of this, you didn't tell. Cramer nodded. And if you find something, I didn't ask. Wolfe inclined his head. Very well. I folded my arms. So what's the actionable part, if we're all blindfolded and gagged? Cramer hesitated. Then, the notebook, it's missing. Wolfe's eyebrow arched. Ah. Whoever killed him, or staged him, or moved him, knew exactly what that notebook meant. They didn't take his wallet. They didn't take his watch. They took the one thing that mattered. I tapped my pencil. So we're hunting a book someone else definitely wants more than we do. Sounds relaxing. Cramer gave me a look. Next time someone wants city government cleaned up, maybe start with a broom instead of a corpse. That'll be my suggestion at the next council meeting, I said. Wolfe cut in, voice cool. Inspector, you mentioned a donor who believes he owns the league. Yeah, Cramer's expression darkened. But that name stays with me, for now. Of course, Wolfe murmured. And the coded notebook? Describe it. Small, black, cloth-bound, about the size of a passport. X kept it with him everywhere, never left his sight. And now, Wolfe said, it has left his life entirely. Cramer nodded once. The room was quiet for 10 seconds. Wolfe's eyes drifted to the window, then back to the inspector. You are aware, I trust, that coming here constitutes departure from protocol. For what it's worth, Cramer said, I knocked. That, Wolfe said, was the most unsettling part. Cramer actually smirked. Barely. All right, Wolfe, I've said what I came to say. I'll leave you to whatever you do. Wolfe nodded. Very well. Cramer turned to go. His hand hovered over the doorknob. Wolfe? Yes? If this blows up in my face, I will not embarrass you, Wolfe said, nor will I betray your confidence. Cramer exhaled, long and slow. All right, Wolfe, he said softly. I'll wait for your report. He left. Wolfe watched the closed door for a full 10 seconds, then he said, Archie. Yes, sir. Fetch beer. Before dinner? Yes. Which in Wolfe speak meant he was worried. I grinned. 2 glasses or 1? He sighed. 2. Don't make me repeat myself. I went to get the glasses. If you've never pretended to be a messenger while walking into a building full of people who'd gladly bury you under a stack of financial ledgers, you've never truly sampled the Manhattan civic experience. I walked into the League headquarters the next morning at 10:42 with a clipboard, a forged delivery slip Wolfe had signed with more flourish than necessary, and the general attitude of a man delivering a fruit basket rather than poking around a political hornet nest. The lobby looked the same as yesterday, marble, brass, and the faint aroma of powerful people sweating politely. The receptionist eyed me like I was a stain trying to enter high society. Delivery? She asked. Messenger service, I said brightly. I bring joy, sorrow, or tax forms, dealer's choice. She barely blinked. I'd have to up my comedy for this crowd. I took an elevator to the 6th floor, following the directory until I found a door labelled accounting, authorised staff only. The sign looked lonely, so I ignored it. Inside, desks sat in neat militarised rows, typewriters clicked, adding machines purred, and accountants hunched like monks illuminating manuscripts no one would ever be allowed to read. At the back, Theodore Wexley sat perspiring through his collar. The man's forehead glistened like someone had shellacked him. He saw me coming and immediately tried to melt into his chair. I planted myself in front of his desk. Morning, I said. You look like you're about to audit your own conscience. I'm busy, he stammered. Who are you? Messenger, I said, flashing the clipboard. But let's not insult each other. We both know you're expecting company. His eyes flicked to the door, classic guilt tick. I leaned in. Relax. I'm not police. I'm not press. I'm not the ghost of missing board members. I just want to talk. His face drained of colour. If you found the body, he whispered, forget it. They're not done. I froze. That wasn't the line you expect from a sweating bean counter unless he's seen more than ledgers. They? I asked. Care to specify, or shall I guess from the League's membership directory? He swallowed so hard I could hear it. You don't know what you're stepping into, Mr. Goodwin, I said. Archie Goodwin. He flinched. Then you're worse off than I thought. You should leave. Now. Before I could coax more out of him, a scream sliced through the corridor. It was high, sharp, and full of panic, the kind of scream people only release when death has just stepped into the room. Wexley bolted upright. I was already moving, dodging desks and filing cabinets. Another scream followed, then frantic footsteps. The sound came from the main stairwell. I shoved the door open and nearly collided with 2 staffers pressed against the wall like they were trying to merge with it. They pointed downward, eyes bulging. At the bottom of the stairwell, sprawled like a broken mannequin, lay the woman who had hired us, the secretary who hadn't wanted to give her name. Her neck was twisted at a brutal angle, her legs bent unnaturally, one shoe dangling off her toes. Her purse sat neatly beside her, strap arranged with such careful precision it made my stomach drop. Someone had staged this, not sloppily but deliberately, giving her the neatness of a personal collapse. But the scuff marks told the truth. The toe of her shoe had scraped the step above. Another scuff on the next. She had been dragged and placed, dead long before gravity got a vote. I knelt, careful not to touch her. Her right hand was clenched tight around something. I pried her fingers open only enough to glimpse a torn scrap of paper, ink marks forming what looked like half a cipher sequence. A clue, and a damn dangerous one. Behind me someone gasped. Is she— Yes, I said grimly, she's gone. More footsteps thundered toward us. What happened? Who is that? Should we call? They didn't finish because the stairwell door burst open again, and this time it wasn't staff, it was Inspector Cramer, face flushed, cigar clamped between his teeth. He scanned the scene, saw me crouched beside the body, and bit down so hard the cigar nearly snapped. "Goodwin," he barked. "Why are you here?" A normal man would get defensive. I'm not normal. "Delivering a message," I said. "Apparently she won't be reading it." Cramer shoved past 2 League members. "Everyone get back, clear the stairs, nobody touches anything." A man in an expensive suit piped up. "Inspector, this is highly irregular." "So is death," Cramer snapped. "Move." He crouched beside me. "You find anything?" "Only that she didn't fall," I murmured. "Dragged. Arranged. Someone wanted this to look tidy." Cramer's jaw tightened. He didn't argue. He didn't have to. "This is bad," he said quietly, for my ears only. "They're killing their own now." "Who?" I asked. "Damn if I know," he muttered. Behind us, League personnel had gathered like vultures dressed in business casual. Whispers flew. Sabotage, rival factions, external enemies, political warfare. Then came the red herring, a trembling junior administrator insisting that a rival civic faction had vowed to disrupt the League's cohesion. Probably nonsense, but the perfect smoke cloud. Cramer rose. "Goodwin, you're coming with me." "Wolfe won't like that," I said. "I won't like it if you contaminate my scene." "You're more worried about me than the corpse." "It's a close race," he growled. We stepped aside to let the medical examiner and detectives flood in. Pearlie Stebbins arrived, bulldog face set in stone. He shot me a glare, but Cramer shook his head just enough to keep Stebbins from dragging me out by the collar. "She was our client," I told Cramer quietly. "I know," he muttered. "Damn it." He glanced toward the stairwell again, shoulders heavy. "This isn't sabotage from outside. This was internal, and now I've got 2 deaths in the same building with the same whispering power structure. If I push too hard, I'll get reassigned to Staten Island traffic posts." "Romantic," I said. "Shut up, Goodwin." But he didn't mean it. Not fully. Back at the brownstone at 12:30, Wolfe was in the office with a scowl so deep it looked carved. He was not in the plant rooms. Orchid hours were being sacrificed at the altar of homicide. That alone told me he was worried. He didn't wait for me to sit. "Report." I did. Every detail. From Wexley's panic to the staged body to the torn scrap of cipher. When I finished, Wolfe leaned back, steepling his fingers. His eyes had narrowed into dark slits that suggested he was mentally lining up every League member against a firing squad. "Archie," he said, "retrieve the scrap." I placed it gently on his desk blotter. He examined it without touching it directly, eyes moving like a chess master scanning a new board. "A cipher," he murmured, "half of one." "Yes." He inhaled once, sharply. "And she intended to bring it here." "I think so." He shut his eyes. "Confound it, Archie. Must I lose you to their ineptitude?" That was Wolfe speak for concern multiplied by outrage. I grinned. "You keep saying that like it's my hobby to get murdered." "It is your hobby to meddle," he retorted. "You will not return to that building." "With respect, no." He opened his eyes. "Not until I have decoded this. It could take days." "It will take as long as it takes." I sat, arms folded. "So, I twiddle my thumbs while killers stroll around with notebooks and ciphers." Wolfe's voice dropped into baritone territory. "Archie, they have already killed twice. You will not return and present yourself as a third opportunity." There it was. Concern, wrapped in indignation, tied with a ribbon of stubborn affection. I leaned back. "All right, I'll be grounded. Temporarily." "Temporarily," he echoed. The phone rang. Wolfe scowled at it. I answered. "Nero Wolfe's residence." Cramer's voice was rough. "Goodwin." "Yes?" "You tell Wolfe that if he finds anything, I don't want details yet. Just a warning." "I'll relay it," I said. "And Goodwin?" "Yes." "Don't be an idiot." He hung up before I could say that idiocy is contextual. I turned back to Wolfe. "The inspector sends his love." Wolfe snorted. "You may go and fetch Fritz. I require coffee." "That's your ritual closure for the scene?" I asked. "It is a command," Wolfe said. I saluted. "Coffee it is." When Nero Wolfe decides to ignore the orchids, Manhattan should declare a civic emergency. At 9:04 the next morning, instead of rising toward the plant rooms like a very large and irritable helium balloon, Wolfe was seated in his office staring at the torn scrap of cipher as if it had personally offended him. He didn't glance at me, the windows or the clock. He was communing with the paper. If the scrap had sprouted legs and walked across the desk, Wolfe would have considered it an acceptable conversational partner. I sat opposite him, tapping a pencil against a notepad. "If you stare harder," I offered, "it might decode itself out of fear." Wolfe didn't blink. "Archie, you are speaking." "I often do." "I am aware." He lifted the slip of paper delicately with brass tweezers, the kind he usually reserves for rare orchid blossoms or particularly stupid client letters. "Observe," he said. "I am." He pointed at the cipher. "Initials, nothing more, but initials imply names, and names imply accounts. These correspond to donors." "League donors?" I asked. "Yes." "How do you know?" "Because anonymity is not anonymity if one employs recognizable patterning." He shot me a look. "You are tapping your pencil." "I am thinking." "It is a dissonant accompaniment." I put the pencil down. Wolfe resumed his staring match with the cipher. "A lighthouse," he murmured, "wreathed in laurel. The League emblem." "I saw that emblem on our anonymous client's pin before she died," I said. "Yes, a mark of membership at the highest level." Wolfe's voice was low, troubled. "This list corresponds to the inner circle of financial contributors." "And the cipher?" "A slush fund," he said simply. "Money disguised as civic virtue." I leaned back. "Well, if Dalewood's pen writes checks the way it writes alibis, we're in for a novel." Wolfe snorted. Rare praise for my humour. He adjusted the scrap under a magnifier. "This half-note lists allocations. The missing notebook will reveal the recipients." "Meaning?" "Which committee members accepted illicit funds in exchange for votes, approvals, endorsements. Political corruption," he said, "is like mould. It thrives in darkness and secrecy. This cipher is sunlight." Before I could reply, the doorbell rang at 9:20. Not a client ring. A short, firm double tap. The Panzer signature. I opened the door. Saul Panzer slid inside with his usual quiet efficiency, flat cap tucked under his arm. Saul always looks like a man who could make any alibi believable or any witness talk with nothing but silence. "Morning, Archie," he said. "Wolfe." Wolfe inclined his head. "Report." Saul sat. "I visited Theodore Wexley last night." "That was unwise," Wolfe muttered. "It was necessary," Saul answered without apology. "He's scared stiff. He recently withdrew a sum of cash far beyond his accountant's salary." "Motivation?" Wolfe asked. "Blackmail, most likely. Someone paid him to keep quiet or to look away." Saul reached into his coat and produced a small object wrapped in tissue. He placed it on Wolfe's desk, found near the elevator shaft after the first death. Wolfe opened the tissue with the same care he'd use for a 100-year-old orchid. Inside lay a pen cap, fine gold trim, engraved initials, expensive craftsmanship. "Lucius Dalewood," Wolfe said immediately. "You're sure?" I asked. "I have seen him wield this absurdly ostentatious writing instrument at least twice," Wolfe said. "He flourishes it the way a peacock displays feathers." Saul nodded. "I saw him carrying it the night before the body was found." "So Dalewood was near the scene," I said. "That's one suspect." "And Wexley is another," Wolfe added. "And Lydia Berriman," Saul finished. "She's been meeting privately with Dalewood and 2 other donors. Whisper sessions, no paper trails." Wolfe closed his eyes. "This is a nest." "A viper pit," I corrected. He didn't disagree. Saul continued. "The elevator operator from the fatal night was bribed. Cash inside his locker. He claims he didn't know why he was paid to step away from the controls for 3 minutes. "Long enough to stage a fall," Wolfe murmured. I added, "and long enough to remove the notebook." Saul nodded. "If the operator is telling the truth." "Which he might not be," I said. "Or might," Saul countered. I grinned. A perfect red herring. Saul stood. "I'll keep digging, quietly." Wolfe said, "Exercise caution, Mr. Panzer." Saul tipped his hat. "Always." He slipped out without a sound. When the door shut, Wolfe exhaled, slow and heavy. "Archie, the notebook is the fulcrum. Without it, we grope in shadow." The phone rang at 10:02. Wolfe glared at it. "Answer." I did. Nero Wolfe's residence. Cramer, voice worn, gravelly. "Goodwin, put him on." Wolfe extended his hand. I passed the receiver. "This is Wolfe," Silence on the line, then a slow breath. There's a leak in the league, Cramer said, and every plug gets murdered. Your persistence in metaphor is, shut up, I don't have energy for wordplay today. He sighed. Look, Wolfe, I know you're working this. I know Goodwin's got his nose where it doesn't belong. Fine. I just want you to know something. Yes? Cramer lowered his voice. You're right. That was not a phrase one hears from Inspector Cramer more than once every 7 years, usually during earthquakes. Wolfe's lips twitched. About what, Inspector? The first death. And the second. Cramer's voice dipped further. This wasn't random. The League has internal rot. Someone in that building has been laundering donor money, and someone else found out. This we have surmised, Cramer grunted. Well, surmise faster. I'm being squeezed from above, from the sides, from people who shouldn't even know my name. Then perhaps, Wolfe said smoothly, you should withdraw from the investigation. If I could, I'd be on a train to Vermont, Cramer snapped. But no, they want me to solve it without solving it. They want a culprit without consequences. They want headlines without facts. Ah, politics. Politics, Cramer said, is homicide with fancier stationery. I grinned at that. Cramer continued, I'm not calling to threaten warrants or bark demands. I'm calling because you're the only damn person in Manhattan not afraid of these people. You find something, you call me. I won't interfere. A long pause. I won't, he repeated softly. Interfere. Wolfe's expression softened by about a millimetre. Very well, Inspector. Cramer hung up without goodbye. Wolfe returned the receiver to its cradle. For a moment he was silent. Then, Archie, prepare the typewriter. For dictation? For order, Wolfe said. Order calms disorder. I rolled the typewriter onto the desk. Wolfe leaned forward, hands steepled, eyes narrowed. Begin, he said. I placed my fingers on the keys. Entry 1, Wolfe dictated. The cipher consists of initials correlating to donor identities. The presence of repeated letters indicates consistent participation in a slush fund. The absence of terminal punctuation suggests the list was still in progress when torn. I typed rapidly. Wolfe continued, his voice precise, measured. Entry 2. The pen cap recovered by Mr. Panzer belongs to Lucius Dalewood. His presence near the site of the first death implies involvement or proximity. His known egotism suggests he would not willingly allow his pen to be separated from his possession unless startled, interrupted, or guilty. Click, click, click. The typewriter sang. Entry 3. Mr. Wexley withdraws funds beyond his salary. Either he is blackmailed or complicit, or both. His warning to Archie implies knowledge of danger. I nodded. He was sweating like a hothouse begonia. Wolfe ignored me. Entry 4. Lydia Berriman holds private conferences with donors. Her faction may be involved in political manoeuvring. Whether she is predator or prey is unclear. I finished typing. Wolfe closed his eyes. Archie. Yes. Bring me beer. It's barely 11. I am aware, Wolfe said, scowling. Bring beer. That was Wolfe speak for. This case is moving faster than I want, and I need fortification before the universe provides another corpse. I rose. Coming right up. The trouble with walking into a penthouse at 11:07 in the morning is that it makes you feel like you've either stumbled into the wrong tax bracket or the wrong alibi. Lydia Berriman's building was the sort of gleaming tower that made the rest of Manhattan feel like it had forgotten to polish itself. I handed my name to the doorman, who looked me over as though I'd arrived to steal the drapes, and rode the elevator up 28 floors, while rehearsing the delicate art of interviewing a woman who could freeze a river just by arching an eyebrow. When the elevator doors opened, I stepped into a marble foyer that could have doubled as a museum lobby. A splash of abstract art, one of those pieces that suggest the painter lost an argument with several buckets of paint, hung above a console table carved from something rare enough to get you arrested if you tried to import it today. A pair of French doors stood open, revealing Lydia Berriman posed in a living room that belonged on the front cover of a society magazine. She didn't stand. She didn't smile. She simply looked at me the way a queen looks at a court jester and gestures for him to perform. "Mr. Goodwin," she said. Her voice was cool but not icy, more like a well-refrigerated martini. "Nero Wolfe sends you?" "He does," I said. "He also sends his regrets that he cannot attend in person." A flicker of amusement touched her lips. Mr. Wolfe never attends anywhere in person. True, I said, but it sounds more diplomatic when I phrase it as regret instead of inertia. She gestured toward a chair so sleek it might have been carved from a single whisper of lacquer. I sat, resisting the urge to grip the armrests just to see whether they were real or a hallucination produced by expensive lighting. You wanted to ask me about the unfortunate incidents at the League, she said. 2 deaths in 2 days qualifies as more than unfortunate, I said. It qualifies as a pattern. Patterns are dangerous, she said, her eyes cool. People use them to invent motives where none exist. Then by all means, I said, help me uninvent one. She tilted her head. What do you want to know? Your relationship with Lucius Dalewood, I said, purely in the civic sense. If she flinched, it was microscopic. Lucius funds several of our initiatives. I heard he funds more than that, I said, including certain off-the-record activities. Her smile was a blade. Do you always begin interviews with insinuation? I find it saves time. She rose, a slow, elegant motion, and walked toward the window overlooking half of Manhattan. Sunlight framed her like she'd planned it. Lucius is many things, she said, but he is not a murderer. That's an interesting alibi, I said. Is it recent? She turned. I spent last night at a private dinner with donors. Lucius was there. We didn't leave until after 1. Anyone else willing to vouch for that? Preferably someone without a checkbook involved. 3 people, she said, all of them credible. Credible or wealthy, I asked. Both. Her alibi was too smooth, too polished, like her marble floors, beautiful, but if you stared long enough you saw your own suspicion reflected back. And the whistleblower, I asked casually. The board member who vanished just before he became a corpse. She didn't blink. Tragic, but not connected to me. Everyone in that building seems connected. That is the problem with civic networks, she said. Everyone touches everything, including rot. I tried a misleading jab. Some say you and Dalewood argued recently. Some, she said, should mind their own business. We disagreed over funding allocations. That hardly makes me a murderer. She walked back toward me, heels tapping on marble like a gavel. Now, Mr. Goodwin, unless you have actual questions... A chime from the private elevator interrupted her. She stiffened, not fear, but irritation. Excuse me? She disappeared briefly, speaking to someone I couldn't see. I caught a phrase, tell him to wait downstairs, before she returned with a tight smile. We're done here. Are we? I stood. You've given me nothing useful. I've given you truth, she said. If you wanted scandal, you should try the newspapers. I left her penthouse with the growing suspicion that Lydia Berriman could commit a murder without wrinkling her blouse, and also the equally strong suspicion that she wanted Dalewood blamed for something. Whether that something was murder or merely bad bookkeeping was still open to interpretation. The elevator arrived with a soft ding. I stepped inside, hit the lobby button and leaned back. The ride down was smooth until the 10th floor, when the elevator jolted to a halt and the doors slid open on a dim, unoccupied corridor. Then someone slammed into me. A figure in a security uniform, cap pulled low, jacket zipped high, grabbed my coat, yanked me out of the elevator, and shoved me against the wall hard enough to rattle my teeth. "Stop digging," the masked voice snarled, breath hot and angry, "or you'll get the same report Cramer can't file." I'd like to say I reacted with poise and strategy. In reality, I did what any respectable assistant to Nero Wolfe does when threatened by an amateur. I kicked him in the shin and swung an elbow into his ribcage. He grunted, stumbled, and swung a fist that grazed my jaw. I returned the favor with a punch that connected with something that felt like shoulder or ego. The corridor lights flickered, giving the fight a cheap noir effect I didn't entirely appreciate. The attacker shoved me again, harder this time, then tore away down the hallway. "Stay out of it," I started after him, but the elevator doors slid shut like they were on his payroll. As I lunged to stop them, something tore. A button clattered to the floor. A metal button. I picked it up. Lighthouse emblem, laurel leaves, League insignia. Red herring or real lead? Jury still out. By the time I reached the lobby, the attacker was gone. The doorman looked at me with mild alarm. "Sir, are you all right?" "Yes," I lied. "Just trying out the building's gravity." I left before he could call a doctor. Back at the brownstone at 11:58, Wolfe was at his desk, glaring at a book as if it had betrayed him. He took one look at my bruised jaw and scowled so fiercely the book wilted. What, he demanded, happened? I tripped, I said. Archie. Fine. Someone jumped me. In Berriman's building. Wolfe's fists pressed against the desk blotter. You will not return there. With respect, no, he snapped. Confound it, Archie. Must I lose you to villains who cannot even execute a competent assault? That's a touching worry. Nonsense, he said too fast. I placed the button on his desk. From the attacker's sleeve, he examined it. A league emblem. Security uniform? Yes, I paused. Though that might mean nothing. Could be stolen or planted. Could be, Wolfe said, tone strained, but probability suggests otherwise. He pulled the bell cord with enough force to register as emotion. Fritz appeared silently in the doorway. Dinner early, Wolfe ordered. For Mr. Goodwin. I smirked. You sound like an alarmed aunt. Be silent. I was. Wolfe sat back, glowering at the emblem. This, he growled, is intolerable. They attack my assistant? Phooey. Nice to know you care, he glared. Archie, bring the typewriter later. For now, rest. Which was Wolfe speak for. You scared me. Now stop moving. I headed upstairs, touching my jaw gingerly. Behind me, Wolfe muttered something in Latin that probably translated to idiots, villains, or politics. In my book, all three applied. If you've never visited a boarding house that smells like boiled despair and yesterday's socks, then you've never accompanied Saul Panzer on an extraction mission. At 9:50 that night, Saul led me to a narrow brownstone on the Lower West Side, a neighborhood where anonymity came free with the peeling wallpaper. The landlady pointed upstairs without enthusiasm. Either she didn't like visitors or she was tired of men sweating through their collars at all hours. Saul climbed like a ghost. I followed with the less subtle footsteps of a man whose shins still remembered the security guard from my last adventure. On the third floor, Saul paused outside a door with peeling paint and tapped twice, soft but deliberate, a coded rhythm. Wexley opened it an inch, eyes wide, pupils dilated like a cornered mouse. When he saw us, he sagged with relief and terror in equal measure. Mr. Panzer, Mr. Goodwin, thank God. Don't thank yet, Saul said, sliding inside. I followed, shutting the door behind me. The room was small, dim, and decorated exclusively in shades of regret. A single lamp flickered on a chipped dresser. Wexley paced in cramped, frantic lines. His tie was gone, his shirt wrinkled, and he looked like he hadn't slept since Roosevelt's last term. You found me, he said breathlessly. How? Your landlord talks too much, Saul said mildly. Sit. Wexley sat, then stood, then sat again. They're going to kill me, he whispered. You don't understand. I understand plenty, I said. You stole the whistleblower's notebook. He froze. I didn't steal it. I took it for safekeeping. Same sport, different umpire. Wexley wrung his hands. He told me he had proof. Proof of a slush fund, bribed votes, political contracts, everything. He said he needed someone honest to hold it until he went public. And he chose you, I said. The accountant with more withdrawals than a bank panic. Wexley winced. I only took money once, to pay debts, gambling. I'm not proud. He said he'd help me get straight. And then he wound up murdered. Wexley closed his eyes. I panicked. I hid the notebook. I didn't know who to trust. Saul leaned against the wall, arms crossed. And then you tried to sell it. I didn't, Wexley yelped. I didn't try to sell it. I just wanted protection. I thought maybe Lydia Berriman would know what to do. I whistled softly. She seemed like your best bet for survival. She's powerful, connected. She could negotiate. I wasn't going to ask her for money. Just salvation, I said. A bargain basement absolution. Wexley grimaced. I never reached her. Someone followed me, broke into my room last night. And took the notebook, Saul said. Wexley nodded miserably. I heard them. I hid under the bed. They thought I was gone. When I came out, it was gone. Convenient, I said. He flinched. I swear it. They stole it. Who's they? I pressed. I don't know. I only know what was left. He reached into his coat pocket, very slowly, very carefully, and pulled out a single slip of paper, torn at the edges, the last surviving page of the whistleblower's notebook. This, he whispered. I took it gently. The page described several meetings between the whistleblower and Lucius Dalewood. Dates, places, notes about heated arguments. Dalewood had motive. Big, glittering motive. "So Berriman never got the notebook," I said aloud. Wexley shook his head. "Someone used me. They wanted it to look like I'd give it to her so she'd take the fall. But I never got that far." Saul nodded. "The red herring cracks." "Red herring?" Wexley asked, bewildered. "Never mind," I said. "You've given us the first honest thing you've said all day." He looked at me helplessly. "What do I do now?" "You call Wolfe," Saul said simply. I handed him the phone on the rickety nightstand. He dialed with trembling fingers. When Wolfe answered, I heard every ounce of iron in his voice. "This is Nero Wolfe." "Mr. Wolfe," Wexley stammered, I want protection. I'll come to your brownstone. I'll tell everything I know. I don't want to die." Wolfe's sigh travelled clearly across the line. "Mr. Wexley, if you arrive voluntarily, I will provide temporary sanctuary. But know this, if you prevaricate, obfuscate, or attempt to mislead me—" "I won't," Wexley gasped. "I swear." "Then come at once," Wolfe said. "Do not stop. Do not speak to anyone. Do not allow anyone to approach you." I could picture Wolfe at his desk, leaning forward just enough to betray concern he would deny if confronted. Then another voice crackled on the line. Cramer, he had overheard. "Wolfe," Cramer said, tone quiet but tight. "Don't let him die before he talks." Wolfe replied, "I endeavour never to worsen what others have already jeopardized." Cramer grunted. "Just keep your doors locked. I'll try to get men near your block unofficially." Wolfe muttered something unreadable and hung up. Wexley sagged. "He'll protect me?" "For a while," I said. "Then I'll go. I'll go right now." Saul nodded. "We'll leave first. Separate exits. Watch your back." We left through the stairwell. At the front door, Saul glanced over his shoulder. "If someone wants him dead badly enough to kill twice, they'll try again." "That's why Wolfe wants him inside," I said. "He can protect him better than the League can protect its reputation." Saul departed into the night, melting into the shadows like he had stock options in darkness. I waited half a block to make sure no one tailed me. A red herring in a hallway earlier this week had been enough for a lifetime. I returned to the brownstone at 10:46. Wolfe was in his office, frowning at the cipher page through a magnifier. "Well?" he demanded. "He confessed," I said. I handed him the final torn page. Wolfe scrutinized it. "Dalewood, then?" "Looks that way." "Looks," Wolfe echoed dryly, "are the preferred weapons of deceivers." Before I could reply, the phone rang again. I answered. Cramer. "Goodwin," he barked. "Wexley left 5 minutes ago. You seen him yet?" "No," I said. "He should have arrived already. It's a 10-minute walk." Wolfe looked up sharply. Cramer lowered his tone. "Find him. I'll circle the block." He hung up. A pit opened in my stomach. Wexley, terrified, desperate, clutching the last confession he had. And he should have been on Wolfe's stoop by now. Wolfe rose, actually rose, from his chair. "Archie, coat." I stared. "You're leaving the office?" "No," he scowled. "I'm going to the front door." That alone was seismic. I grabbed my coat and we marched to the vestibule. Wolfe stopped short of the threshold, habit stronger than panic, and gestured. "Open it." I did. The street was quiet, unsettlingly quiet. No sign of Wexley, no footsteps, no figure hurrying, no silhouette of a man rolling in fear toward sanctuary, just the night, and an absence. Wolfe's jaw tightened. He has been intercepted. Or he ran. "Archie," Wolfe said, voice low and heavy, "do not insult us both. Someone took him." I shut the door. Wolfe stood motionless in the foyer, his eyes, usually half-lidded with boredom, burned. "This," he whispered, "is the penultimate indignity." "Penultimate?" "Yes," he growled, "because when I discover who abducted my witness, the ultimate indignity shall be theirs." "Meaning?" "Archie," he said, "bring Saul. This stops tonight." And that was Wolfe's version of a war cry. There are days when the brownstone feels like a well-oiled, perfectly tuned machine, humming along to Wolfe's rigid routines. And then there are days when the man decides to summon half of Manhattan's civic aristocracy to our doorstep, and the place feels like a powder keg wearing a velvet smoking jacket. The next evening began that way, thick with expectation, tension, and the unmistakable scent of Wolfe preparing to spring a trap. At 7:30, Wolfe was already in his office, planted in the red leather chair like a general reviewing troop positions. Papers were arranged with ceremonial precision across his desk. Cipher fragments, donor lists, Saul's notes, Arthur Wexley's lone surviving page, and one magnifier placed like a judge's gavel. Fritz had cleared away the remnants of dinner, veal and saffron butter, which Wolfe had eaten with all the enthusiasm of a man chewing through a moral dilemma. I stood by the globe, watching Wolfe mutter in subdued but deadly tones. "Political money," he murmured, "is the most odious of currencies. It corrupts the giver, the receiver, and the poor intermediary caught in between." "That's poetic," I said. "But in this case it also seems to corrupt elevator operators, accountants, and security guards." The guard, Wolfe snapped, was not a guard. He pointed to the lighthouse emblem button lying on a saucer, a disguise, worn by someone with access to Berriman's building but no official role. "Dalewood," I suggested. "He would not risk sullying himself with a uniform," Wolfe muttered. "But he would bribe someone who would, as he bribed the elevator operator, as he funded the slush, as he cursed the whistleblower in public meetings." "Which lowers the list of likely killers to him," Wolfe grimaced. "Not conclusively. Lydia Berriman's faction had motive as well, though they were meant to be scapegoats rather than perpetrators." He tapped the cipher. "But the notebook was seized by someone who knew Wexley was coming to me. And that means someone who heard him call. Or someone tracking him." Wolfe closed his eyes briefly. "Archie, consider the sequence. The first death happened during an emergency board meeting. The second, hours after another private session. Wexley was attacked minutes after a league gathering ended." "And all those feature Dalewood," I said. "And Berriman," Wolfe added. "And two others whose stupidity exceeds their cunning." He reached for the bell cord. "It is time." I moved to the door. "You want me to clear a path for the procession?" "No," Wolfe said, tone like cracking granite. "I want you to fetch Lon Cohen." I blinked. "Lon? He's not on our suspect list." "He is on my leverage list," Wolfe growled. "If these people refuse to come voluntarily, the Gazette will print the cipher by dawn." That, I had to admit, was one of Wolfe's more elegant threats. Lon arrived within 20 minutes, smelling faintly of printer's ink and deadlines. "Wolfe," he said, "I hope you're not dragging me into a libel suit." "On the contrary," Wolfe replied, "you are the shield preventing one." Lon grinned. "Well then, use me." Wolfe nodded once, high praise in his language. Then we waited, and the parade began. At 8:05, Lydia Berriman swept in wearing a fur stole that looked like it cost more than the average city block. She sat rigidly, chin lifted, eyes sharp enough to slice Fritz's best pork loin. Dalewood came next, pausing just long enough to sneer at Fritz, who was merely passing with a tray of coffee, before settling into a chair large enough for his ego. He carried no pen tonight, probably didn't want us to use it as Exhibit A. Two other board members followed, faces pale, hands fidgeting. They looked like men who had recently discovered that civic reform could be hazardous to their health. Cramer arrived last. He didn't storm, stomp, or shout. He knocked, one soft rap. That alone nearly sent me into a dead faint. When I opened the door, he stood there with his hat in hand, jaw set, cigar unlit. "Goodwin," he said, "I'm off duty." "That explains the lack of profanity." He stepped inside, gaze sweeping the room. "Wolfe," Wolfe inclined his head. "Inspector." Cramer took the chair closest to the door, as if he expected to be hauled away by the press at any moment. "If you can solve it cleanly," he said, "I'll report it cleanly." That was the most respectful he'd ever been in this house. Wolfe didn't smile, but something in his face eased. "Very well," Wolfe said. "We begin." Everyone shifted. The air thickened. Fritz closed the office doors with a soft click that might as well have been the drop of a trap door. Wolfe gestured toward the papers. "You have all come because political money has metastasized into homicide." Dalewood bristled. "This is outrageous." "Silence," Wolfe said. Dalewood actually obeyed. Wolfe continued. "Allow me to summarize events, lest any of you pretend confusion." His voice took on the ceremonial weight of a judge and the cold precision of a surgeon. The whistleblower, Mr. Ernest Greer, discovered discrepancies in the League's donor accounts, funds routed to illicit recipients. Wexley, your accountant, he nodded toward the empty corner where Wexley should have been, attempted to shield him. The secretary, Miss Havens, also protected him. Both are dead. Berriman's lips thinned. Dalewood swallowed. The notebook containing the proofs, Wolfe said, was taken, first by Wexley, who feared exposure, and then stolen from him by the killer. Cramer scratched his chin. Wexley told you that? He did, Wolfe said, and now he has vanished. Berriman's composure cracked for a moment. Vanished? Yes, Wolfe said softly. He called me for sanctuary. He never arrived. I watched Dalewood carefully. A twitch, barely a flicker. But a man used to bribery bristles when someone mentions loose ends. Wolfe arranged several objects in a neat row. You will each explain, he said, why these clues point to you, and why they do not. He tapped the luxury pen cap. This belongs to you, Mr. Dalewood. Dalewood flushed. I lost it days ago, at the elevator shaft where Greer died. That proves nothing. Wolfe lifted the lighthouse button. This was torn from a disguise worn by someone impersonating security in Miss Berriman's building. Berriman frowned. Are you implying that someone used your premises for subterfuge? Wolfe said. Not that you were the individual. She relaxed imperceptibly. Wolfe pointed to the cipher scrap. This contains initials tied to fund laundering. Mr. Wexley confirmed its accuracy. One of the silent board members whispered, My God. And, Wolfe said, both murders occurred during or immediately after board meetings held in emergency executive chambers, meetings accessible only to a handful of you. Dalewood shot to his feet. I refuse to be interrogated like a... Wolfe extended a hand. The room froze. Sit, he said. Dalewood sat. Cramer let out a quiet, appreciative grunt. Hell of a parlour trick. Wolfe settled back, folding his hands over his stomach. Mr. Dalewood, Miss Berriman, gentlemen, someone among you feared exposure enough to kill twice and abduct a third witness. Someone who benefits from disorder while preaching reform. Someone whose wealth lubricates every cog of this machine, I added, and someone who bribes elevator operators when he doesn't want witnesses. Dalewood glared at me. I did no such thing. Saul stepped from the shadowy corner where he'd been silently installed. Wolfe's secret reinforcement. He did, Saul said. I spoke to the operator. He recognized Dalewood. A murmur rippled through the room. Wolfe raised a hand. Silence returned. And, Wolfe said, our killer had time to intercept Wexley only if he followed him from his boarding house, only if he left immediately after Wexley's call. Cramer stiffened. Only 3 board members live close enough to make that timeline work. Wolfe nodded. Precisely. I looked around the room. Berriman, too composed. The 2 lesser board members, too frightened. That left Dalewood. His jaw clenched. His eyes darted. Sweat formed at his temples despite the cool room. Wolfe said, Mr. Dalewood, you ran after Wexley. Your pen cap betrays proximity to the first murder. Your bribes implicate you in the second. Your absence at the expected times and presence at others triangle you into guilt. Dalewood's hands balled into fists. This is... Sit, Wolfe repeated. He did. Cramer rose slightly. You want me to cuff him now? No, Wolfe said firmly. Not yet. The air crackled, every person in the room drawn tight as wire. Tomorrow evening, Wolfe said, we will have the final proof. The notebook will surface, and when it does, he let the sentence hang, thick with implication, you will all return. Berriman narrowed her eyes. You're certain? Yes, Wolfe said. Tonight's gathering is mere prelude, I grinned. If this many big shots take up our chairs again tomorrow, we'll need a zoning permit. Cramer smirked despite himself. Dalewood glared daggers. Wolfe ignored us all. He pulled the bell cord. Fritz appeared. See our guests out, Wolfe said, politely. And with that, the ritual ended. No answers yet, but every piece placed, every suspect shaken, every fuse lit. The showdown was set. By 8 o'clock the next evening, the brownstone had the peculiar stillness of a courtroom waiting for a verdict that might set the city on fire. Wolfe sat behind his desk like a marble statue, Someone had forgotten to dust for the last 3 centuries, hands folded over his stomach, eyes half-lidded, but sharp enough to carve a turkey at 50 paces. The desk lamp cast an amber glow over the assembled documents, cipher scrap, donor lists, the pen cap, the lighthouse button, and the final page salvaged from Wexley's coat. It looked less like an office and more like the command post of an advancing army, which in a way it was. I stood near the globe, pretending to admire Paraguay, mostly to stop myself from pacing a trench in Fritz's carpet. Wolfe's voice finally broke the silence. "Archie," he said, "the chairs." I glanced at the 10 chairs we'd arranged earlier. "If any more civic titans accept your invitation," I said, "we're going to need bleachers." "Phooey," Wolfe muttered. "They are not titans, merely men and women whose ambitions exceed their competence." He wasn't wrong. The doorbell rang at 8:15. Fritz answered. Then the procession began. First came Lydia Berriman, cool, elegant, draped in a sable wrap that probably had its own bank account. She glided into the room with the self-assurance of a woman accustomed to shaping committees, budgets, and weaker wills. She positioned herself in the nearest chair and crossed her legs so precisely I suspected a protractor had been involved. Dalewood followed in a storm cloud of offended wealth. He wore a charcoal suit that could have paid for my monthly rent twice over, and his jaw pulsed with contained fury. He sat heavily, as though chair legs existed solely to be punished by him. 2 remaining board members trickled in, Mr. Greaves, tall and thin with a nose like a hawk's beak, and Mr. Falk, whose face carried the chronically startled expression of a man who'd been reading the wrong documents for 20 years. Then came Cramer. He didn't knock loudly. He barely tapped. When I opened the door, he stepped inside with that weary dignity cops get when they've been chasing truth for so long they've lost the appetite for anything but the end of the chase. He removed his hat, glanced around, and muttered, "Looks like a meeting of the firm of guilty, guilty, and guilty." "Have a seat," I told him. "I'll stand," he said, parking himself near the door like he was guarding the exit. He didn't light his cigar. That alone told me he expected fireworks. Wolfe tugged the bell cord. Fritz arrived with coffee, moved silently between chairs, and vanished like a stagehand at a murder play. Wolfe waited until the last cup had been set. Then he spoke. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "you are here because you stand in proximity to 3 crimes, 1 attempted, 2 fulfilled. You are also here because your professions, wealth, and political stature grant you no immunity from reason." Dalewood bristled. "This is outrageous." Wolfe lifted a hand. "Sit." Dalewood sat. Wolfe continued. "I will recount events plainly. Accuracy is compulsory." He pointed to the cipher scrap. Some time ago, Mr. Ernest Greer, a League whistleblower, discovered a pattern of misallocated funds, donor money routed to clandestine recipients. He informed Mr. Wexley, the accountant, of his findings. Miss Havens, the secretary, became aware of his concerns and attempted to shield him. Berriman's face tightened, but she said nothing. "Mr. Dalewood," Wolfe said, turning, "controlled the donor inflows. He also controlled the discretionary fund, the slush fund. Greer's notebook contained proof of his bribery of staff, his payoff of elevator operators, and his manipulation of committee votes." Dalewood shot to his feet. "You overfed popinjay!" Wolfe's tone dropped to a glacial rumble. "Sit." Dalewood sat again, his face dangerously red. Wolfe gestured toward the pen cap. "This, Mr. Dalewood, was found near the elevator shaft where Greer's body was staged as an accident. It belongs to your custom fountain pen, a gift engraved with your initials. You have confirmed ownership publicly. You should have secured it privately." Dalewood sputtered. "I dropped it days earlier." "Indeed," Wolfe said. "You dropped it at the scene." Cramer muttered quietly. "He's got you there, Dalewood." Wolfe reached for the lighthouse button. This was torn from the sleeve of a security uniform worn inside Miss Berriman's building, one worn by an impostor. Not a guard, but someone who wished to threaten Mr. Goodwin without revealing themselves, someone wealthy enough to acquire a uniform and foolish enough to assume it would conceal their identity. Berriman's sharp gaze flicked toward Dalewood before she could hide it. "And then," Wolfe said, leaning back, fingers steepled, "there is the cipher. Its initials correlate directly with donor entries Mr. Dalewood managed, and the timing, emergency board meetings coinciding neatly with both murders." Falk raised a trembling hand. "Are you saying Dalewood killed them?" "Falk," Berriman snapped, "be silent." Wolfe took a sip of coffee. "Allow us to delineate." His voice sharpened. Greer confronted Dalewood. Greer threatened to expose the slush ledger. That night, during an emergency session, Dalewood bribed the elevator operator to step away. Greer was struck, rendered unconscious, and staged between floors. The pen cap fell during the staging. Cramer nodded. "Matches the bruising pattern." Wolfe proceeded. "Miss Havens, the secretary, discovered signs of staging. She fled. But Mr. Dalewood followed her. He was seen leaving the emergency session after her, and used the stairwell to intercept her. Her body was arranged to simulate a fall, though her scuffed shoes contradict the claim." Berriman shivered. "Monstrous." "Yes," Wolfe agreed. "And then Mr. Wexley, foolish, frightened but not malicious, took the notebook hoping to secure leverage. When unable to sell it to Miss Berriman, who never received his message, he contacted me, and was intercepted by the killer on his way here." Cramer stiffened. "Meaning Dalewood trailed him, grabbed him, and took the notebook." "Precisely," Wolfe said. Dalewood exploded. "This is fabrication. You have no proof. None." Wolfe exhaled. "You brought your briefcase, Mr. Dalewood." Dalewood's eyes widened, and for the first time he looked afraid. Wolfe turned calmly toward me. "Archie, retrieve it." I walked to Dalewood. He clutched the case like a drowning man gripping a lifeline. I smiled pleasantly. "You can hand it to me, or I can take it and leave you with sore knuckles. Dealer's choice." He cursed and shoved it at me. I carried it to Wolfe. "Shall I?" "Yes," Wolfe said. I clicked the brass latches. Inside was a stack of papers bound with a leather strap. On top, Greer's coded ledger, unmistakable and damning. Beneath it, Wexley's remaining confession pages, torn at the edges, and at the bottom, folded, blood-smudged, unmistakably real, Wexley's missing notebook. Dalewood sagged. Berriman exhaled sharply. Greaves buried his face in his hands. Falk whispered a prayer. Wolfe said, softly but with iron, "You killed to protect your scandal, and you failed to account for your own habit of carrying too much with you, pens, bribes, notebooks, and guilt." Cramer stepped forward. "Lucius Dalewood, you are under—" "Wait," Dalewood gasped. "No," Wolfe cut in. "Do not debase us further." Cramer cuffed him. Stebbins, summoned silently from the hall, entered and escorted the man out, Dalewood shouting half-coherent protests all the way down the steps. Berriman rose, pale. "Mr. Wolfe, I had no part." "I know," Wolfe said, "though you were meant to." Greaves and Falk stumbled out after her, shaken to their core. At last the room emptied until only Wolfe, Cramer, Fritz, and I remained. Cramer removed his hat and ran a hand over his face. "Well, Wolfe," he sighed. This one I can report." Wolfe inclined his head. "Professional discretion regarding the client's retainer is expected." Cramer snorted, almost affectionately. "You're impossible. You are impertinent." We might have had a warm moment, but Cramer stopped short of sentiment, settling instead for, "Thanks." Then he left. Silence settled over the room, thick and earned. Wolfe reached for the bell cord. "Fritz." Fritz appeared instantly. "Yes, sir?" "Beer, for Mr. Goodwin and myself." "Yes, sir." Fritz returned with 2 chilled glasses and a pair of bottles, the real stuff. Wolfe poured with ceremony, handed me one, and raised his own glass. "Archie," he said, "your survival is a continual inconvenience. I am gratified by it." I grinned. "Sure. Next time I'll get killed just to streamline your routine." "Don't," Wolfe said firmly. We drank.